everyone, it's Seiji and welcome to...
Hello, Editing Seiji here to say that I changed the name of the podcast to Mochi Doki Mochi, only I recorded this video before that change, so yeah, that's all for now.
Episode 8. I have got a ton of interesting manga that I want to talk about today, so let's just get right to it. So quite recently I read this one-shot called Bota by Itadaku Paru, and this one actually got published in English recently under the title of Drip Drip. I think most people know Itadaki for her manga series called Beastars because that one blew up a couple of years ago after it received an anime adaptation. So yeah, that series features anthropomorphized animals and it centers around this group of high school students who are dealing with a murder mystery. I've only read the first volume of that series, but I remember really enjoying it. But yeah, Itadaki seems to be really prolific. It's just been 6 years since she debuted as a mangaka and she already has over 32 manga volumes out. In any case, let's get back to talking about Bota because this was honestly a roller coaster of a manga and I had a lot of fun reading it. The story is about this 29-year-old woman called Higari Mako, and she works at a hygienic food container factory. Higari has a peculiar affliction in the sense that whenever she touches something dirty, she gets these severe nosebleeds. This is incredibly debilitating for her because she just can't do things that others can do with ease, like for instance, touch money or even touch other people. And Higari has come to the point that she would really like to lose her virginity, but that is something that she has a lot of struggles with because of these nosebleeds. And so this manga really centers on her attempts to and struggles with trying to become intimate with people. Now, I do have to say that the illustrations in this manga are so wild and graphic. Every time Higari tries to become intimate with someone, the scene just instantly turns into a murder scene. And what really adds to the chaos of this manga is Higari's peculiar behavior. She's super wacky and extreme. Like, she has tried to have sex with people so many times that her failures have just driven her completely and utterly mad. For instance, at one point she tries to sleep with one of her co-workers, but then she gets one of her nosebleeds. She then offers to thoroughly sanitize his wiener, and that freaks him out so much that he runs out of the love hotel that they were staying naked, and she starts chasing him, butt-ass naked as well, and completely covered in blood. So yeah, this manga is definitely very wild and goofy, but I did feel that there was quite some depth to it as well. And that is mainly due to this underlying theme of trauma. So when Higari was very young, her mother found out that her father was cheating. And this caused her mother to start sterilizing their entire house in order to rid their space of all dirty things, i.e. all the traces of her father. The importance of cleanliness from then on was hammered into Higari. According to her mother, everything was dirty, especially sex, unless it was with your one true love. It was during this period that Higari's nosebleeds started, and in a sense, these nosebleeds are her way of coping with trauma, and she herself finds that there is quite a dichotomy to these nosebleeds. On one hand, the nosebleeds are incredibly debilitating, especially when it comes to romantic relationships. However, it has also functioned as something that has protected Higari from possible heartbreak. One occasion in the manga that really stands out is when she doesn't start to instantly bleed when kissing a man. And this sends her into a panic so great that she tries to She tries to induce a nosebleed herself by ramming her face into a statue. Like I said, she has gone a little mad. But yeah, despite this manga being on, quite the wacky side, I was really able to empathize with Higari because, yes, everything is like really goofy with the nosebleeds and her doing all these very extreme things. But when it comes down to the bottom line, I guess, she's just someone who has been through trauma that was so severe for her that even her body now has this very visceral reaction whenever this trauma gets, triggered. And throughout the manga, you follow her as she's trying to overcome this, and eventually she meets someone whom she's actually willing to open her heart to. And you're just very, very happy for her when that moment happens. And then that like hope and happiness just gets like just completely crushed. And wow, like when I was reading through that point of the manga, I was just gawking at my screen. Like it just felt like I had been through this betrayal. And I just love it when a manga can kind of like, stealthily creep up on you and just grab you. And this is definitely that type of manga. At least it was for me. I would highly recommend this manga. Also, the volume that I had also contained a one-shot. And this one-shot was about Santa Claus and a sex worker. Which, before you start making assumptions, it's not what it sounds like. Either way, it turns out that Itadaki had made that Santa Claus one-shot for the same publishers that published Bota. And there's a bit of a story behind all of this, because a while ago she was starting a new manga for another magazine, and she found that she wanted to use that Santa Claus character for her new series. And so she went to the publisher and asked if it was okay to use that character since she had already used it for a one-shot for, their magazine. And so the publisher allowed it with one condition, and that was that she was to make another one-shot for them. So yeah, that new manga series that she started working on is called Sanda, and it's set in the near future in which the declining birth rate in Japan has progressed even further. The story centers around this kid called Sanda, who is a second-year middle schooler, and he at some point gets attacked by his knife-wielding classmate called Fuyumura. Sanda later on finds that Fuyumura actually attacked him because one of her friends has gone missing, and two, she believes that Sanda has been cursed. So yeah, that's all I know about this new series. I did get the first 4 volumes on sale a couple of months ago, so hopefully I'll be able to get to that in the coming weeks and I can talk about it on the podcast. Speaking of manga that I've been wanting to read for ages, there's this one that I have been wanting to read for over a year now. The thing that really caught my attention about this particular manga is, of course, the cover, because I'm really superficial when it comes to picking out manga. But yeah, the cover is this really lively image of an older woman smiling as she's filming something with an old-timey looking video camera. There was something about it that just gave off really good vibes. And so a couple of weeks ago, I got around to reading the first 2 volumes. I should tell you what the name of this manga is, shouldn't I? It's called Umi ga Hashiru, Endo Rouru, and it is created by Tarachine John. The story centers around 65-year-old Chinu Umiko. Her husband has recently passed away, and now she's trying to adapt to her life without him. One of the things that she and her husband used to enjoy a lot was watching movies together at home, and doing so always reminded her of their first date when they went to the movie theater together. Now one day she decides to venture off on her own and go to the movies, and she chooses to watch Max, which I think is a reference to Mad Max, which, if you don't know, is this really hardcore post-apocalyptic movie. I've watched it, by the way. I really enjoyed it. But anyway, yeah, she goes to the movies and picks out that one to watch. Now, one of the habits that Umiko has always had when going to the cinema was looking back at the audience instead of at the screen, because she has always really been interested in the reaction of the audience. So she does the same thing during Max, and she gets spotted by someone. As they walk out of the movie, this person tells her that they saw her look back, expressing how they also like to watch the reaction of the audience. They continue to explain that they are a film major at the university nearby. At this point, Umiko musters up the courage to ask this person, who turns out to be called Kai, to come back home with her in order to help her fix her VCR. Kai kinda reluctantly agrees, and they both go to Umiko's house, where Kai manages to fix the VCR, and they end up watching a movie together. When Kai finally sets back home, they ask Umiko if she wants to make a movie. And so that is how their friendship starts. Umiko ends up giving herself a chance, and she decides to enroll in the same course as Kai. The manga follows Umiko's journey of becoming a filmmaker, and so we get to see how she experiences student life again after 45 years, as well as how her and Kai's relationship develops and how they start collaborating and influencing each other as human beings and as filmmakers as well. And so, in a nutshell, this is such a lovely shoujo manga. Right off the bat, I have to highly recommend this manga. I instantly fell in love with this manga, just even because of Umiko's sheer personality. She is so sweet and wholesome, and despite the obstacles that she meets on the road, she always manages to muster up the courage to keep on going, which I think is just incredibly admirable. Kai is also a really great character. They have this kind of tsundere vibe to them, but they're actually really nice and get along very well with Umiko. What I think is very neat about their relationship with Umiko is that it's very easy for them to open up towards her as compared to their other classmates. And in that way, the reader is able to get to know them very quickly. Besides Kai and Umiko, there is also a host of other characters in the manga, and these are mainly their fellow classmates, but because they're all interacting with each other so heavily, it makes for a very lively manga. They are very welcoming of Umiko as an older student, and they try and involve her as much as possible. So they also take her out for drinks and even a night out, and so it's really nice to see Umiko get taken out of her comfort zone in such a way. One of the biggest themes in this manga is also the sea. Umiko tries to film at the sea, and the manga also makes references to movies in which the sea is the primary setting. The sea, however, is most prevalent as a metaphor, as a means to convey Umiko's feelings and passion. Moments where she feels a rush of inspiration are depicted by her surrounded by seawater. There are also times that she feels shaken to the core, so much so that she can't even move. And then there's this layer of seawater caressing her legs. And I just really love that metaphor of loving something so much that it sweeps you away into the ocean and you're just completely immersed in your passion. It's also very clear to see that the mangaka as well is very passionate about movies. At the end of the first volume, they also write that they themselves went to film school, which really isn't that surprising. Also, at the start of every chapter, there is an illustration that serves as a reference to a film. So you'll have Kai, Umiko, or both of them pose as characters of movies, and I just thought that that was really cute. I also wanted to mention that the title has two meanings. So Umi ga hashiru endo rouru could mean the credits through which the ocean runs, which refers to the consistent theme of the sea in the manga, but it also refers to both Umiko's and Kai's names, which are written using the Japanese character for sea. So then looking at the title from that perspective, you can see it as meaning that Kai's and Umiko's names are running through the end credits of a movie. But yeah, that's everything I have for now on this manga. The third volume is out right now as well, so I'm hoping to read that one soon. Moving on, I wanted to talk about this manga called Marriagetoxin, which was written by Jo Myaku and illustrated by Yoda Mitsuki. So this is a really cool amalgamation of a comedy / romance / action manga with a little sprinkle of Komi can't communicate in there as well. The manga centers around a man named Gero Hikaru, who is a hitman from the famous Gero clan that is known for their assassinations by means of poison. He is the heir to his clan and is therefore expected to produce the next person in line. However, seeing that he has never been to school and spent his whole life training to become a top-tier hitman, he doesn't believe he will be able to find someone to marry. His grandmother, however, is putting a lot of pressure on him, but since he's contributing to the family by being an excellent hitman and his sister isn't, his grandmother is forcing her instead to marry a man and produce an heir. The thing is that his sister already has a partner, but that partner happens to be a woman, and so his sister says that having to produce an heir would mean that she would have to break off her relationship in order to marry some random guy proposed by their grandmother. Obviously, this is a huge problem, but then one day Gero is tasked with killing a marriage swindler by the name of Kinosaki Mei, and in a weird turn of events, they end up teaming together in order for Gero to find a marriage partner who he really loves, so that both Gero and his sister can live a life with someone they actually truly love. So this manga started running in April of this year, and there are about 20 plus chapters out, at least at the time that I was reading this manga. So that was like a month ago, I think. And right off the bat, I want to say that in my opinion, this is a total banger. It's such a funny manga with really great writing and action. The manga starts off very strong with a great first chapter that sets up both the premise very nicely as well as the tone for the rest of the manga. Also, Gero is a really great character. Now, despite him being an assassin and killing tons of people, he's really cute and wholesome. But you know, seeing that he is an excellent hitman, he's also a total badass, and so both sides of his personality get shown really well in the manga. I personally thought that he was really likable. Then there's also Kinosaki, who is loads of fun. He is a marriage swindler that swindles both men and women and therefore cross-dresses often. He's super nice, very funny, and just a very likable character who seems to be able to really get the best out of Gero, who he's helping with this journey of self-discovery and love. For me, the comedy of this manga really comes from the great characters. There are a ton of really goofy characters in here that really add to the fun of the story. And, you know, of course you have Gero and Kinosaki themselves. Gero is so clueless when it comes to dating and just, you know, general human interaction. And so that offers a lot of slapstick humor. But anyways, because of Kinosaki, Gero gets to meet a ton of different women. And I do have to admit that when I was reading kind of like the first storyline in which Gero meets the first girl, that I thought, okay, she's going to be the one and he's going to settle with her, and the manga is just going to focus on him developing a relationship with her. But I was so wrong, and I was pleasantly wrong, that is, because despite Gero wanting to find a marriage partner, he also wants to take his time. He wants to take things slow, start off as friends, and maybe if there's a spark, they can turn things into something more. And so that's what he tells this girl, and she's like, yeah, cool, sure thing, I'm down with that. And in that way, Gero gets the opportunity to see, what's out there in the world. He gets to develop himself as a human, as a person. He gets to develop relationships with all sorts of people. And that's just, I think, the most fun thing for me in this manga. Getting to see him interact with other people and not only, romantic interests. Now, besides all of the comedy and romance, there is a lot of action because, as I mentioned, Gero is a hitman, and so this results in him having to fight a ton of baddies. These fights, in my opinion, are super awesome. Not only because the illustrations are really fire and because Gero looks really cool fighting with his poisons, but also because of the ability system of this manga. So there are people called specialists who specialize in one sort of skill. For instance, Gero is a poison specialist, and therefore he can do a lot of really awesome things with poisons. There are also people who are water, door, and sound specialists, and they all use their skills in very unique ways when they're fighting Gero, which causes him to, as an effect, find unique ways to beat them using his poison. In the manga, there are also people called users, like bug and needle users, but up until where I've read, the manga hasn't really expanded on what the differences between those types of people are. In any case, so far I've had just a splendid time reading this manga. Honestly, I feel that it has so much heart, and I really hope that this gets an anime in the future. It definitely has the potential to do really well. So yeah, I would highly recommend this manga, and you can actually read it for free on the Manga Plus site of Shueisha. Also not sponsored, but I will leave a link to that in the description box. So the next manga I read about 1 or 2 years ago, but I never mentioned this in any of the previous Otaku Field Notes episodes, I believe. This manga is called Ojisama to Neko, and it's created by Sakurai Umi. The title of the English editions is A Man and His Cat. The story is about a 1-year-old cat who has been on sale at a pet shop ever since he was born. But no one wants to buy him because they think he's really ugly. That's so sad. But yeah, then one day this man by the name of Kanda comes into the pet shop and he decides to buy the cat, claiming that he seems to be so very lovable. The reason as to why he got this cat was that his wife had always wanted one and suggested that they get one once all their kids had left their home. Unfortunately, she passed away before they got one. Kanda ends up naming the cat Fukumaru, which he derives from the Japanese word for happiness, kofuku. So I don't really have much to say about this manga other than that I feel that it's really wholesome and that I liked it basically. I reread this one actually quite recently for this podcast episode. But yeah, it's very wholesome, but it also gets a bit sad at times because you get to see the struggles that Kanda is facing with being a widow, but he always gets comforted by Fukumaru, which is just so heartwarming. Now, throughout the manga, you also get to know more about Fukumaru's sad life before Kanda took him home. As a reader, you get to understand the fear of abandonment and the feelings of worthlessness that Fukumaru has due to his experiences at the pet shop. And you also get to see how these negative feelings and fears slowly start to diminish as he receives love from and gives love to Kanda. There's also a substantial cast of characters that appear in the manga who are somehow involved in Kanda's life. So these are his fellow music teachers of the music school he works at, his childhood best friend, and so a lot of parts of Kanda's life get explored through this manga. But yeah, it's just a really fun and heartwarming manga, and I would highly recommend it. Now, I can't really remember where I exactly found this manga, but I think it was on this website where I was reading this manga by Uguisu Sachiko, which I think discussed a couple of episodes back. But this is a really cute romance manga called Toumei Otoko to Ningen Onna, SONOUCHI FUUFU ni NARU FUTARI, and it's created by Iwatobi Neko. It has an English title as well, which is The Invisible Man and the Human Lady, We Were Meant to Be Together. I should note though that there currently isn't an official English translation out yet of this manga. If there is, for any titles that I discuss, I'll always put a link to those in the description box below so that you can find them. In any case, this manga is set in a world with different types of beings. You have humans, demons, aliens, anthropomorphized animals, invisible people, you name it, this world has got it. So the story centers around two people, a blind woman named Yako Shizuka, who works at a detective office that is owned by an invisible man called Toumei Akira. What I really like about this story is that it just gets straight to the point. Like within the first 5 pages, Toumei already confesses that he likes Yako and he asks her out on a date and she agrees. So instead of starting at the beginning, we kind of get dropped off somewhere, I guess like quarter ways through. Toumei has already developed feelings for Yako, which she, although being very new to dating, doesn't reject. I should also note that the Japanese title already kind of spoils the ending, or maybe spoil is not really the appropriate word for it. But basically in the title it says two people who will soon become husband and wife. So you already know from the start what you're getting into. It's just a very nice and chill manga about two people starting to date, which eventually leads them to getting married in the future. I've been really enjoying this manga so far. The art style is really neat, and instead of your traditional black and white manga, the background is blue turquoise. Aside from that, the main characters are really great. They're both very sweet and their chemistry is just so good. Despite Toumei being very straightforward with his feelings, it's also very clear he's very nervous about them starting to date. So you'll have these moments where he kind of loses his cool. For instance, there's this one time when Yako is feeling very nervous, and in an effort to kind of put her at ease, he lets her hear his heartbeat to show that he's nervous too, and it's just so incredibly wholesome. They really take the time to get to know one another, sharing their experiences, what it's like to live as an invisible person and what it's like as a blind person. It's a total slow burn romance and a very good one at that, in my opinion. You get to watch them go on cute dates, like a tea making session at a tea shop or a restaurant that serves dinner in the dark because Toumei wanted to experience what it's like for Yako. And it's, I keep saying it, but it's just So wholesome. Also, like I said before, Yako helps Tonome run a detective agency where they offer all types of services such as finding missing persons, running background checks, and gathering evidence. This, however, is not really a huge part of the story, or at least it's not like every chapter a new case pops up and you get to read about how things get solved. Rather, the agency kind of acts like a place for more interactions with other characters. There are namely two other people who work there. There is Jarashi, who is an anthropomorphized bobcat who does work with regards to catching people or protecting them. She has a very bubbly personality, she's very kind-hearted, but also really nosy, so she picks up really quickly that Tonome and Yako are dating, and she tries her best to help things like move along very smoothly. Then there's Kikira. He's a human with a tsundere personality in the way that he's very grumpy, but he actually is very nice, although he doesn't like it when people point that out, and he mainly does information collection. So the manga mainly takes place at the detective agency and the places that Tonome and Yako go on dates. Another thing I also really liked was how much attention is being paid to the portrayal of Yako's blindness, in the sense that you throughout the manga get to see how she goes about her work. For instance, the manga shows her using a braille terminator, and it shows how she makes use of audio tools in order to read documents. There's also this moment when Yako and Jarashi go out shopping for Yako, and she wants to know more about how the clothes look. So she makes use of this gadget called a talking color reader, which scans the color and tells you which it is. Something I didn't even know existed, so it was very cool to learn about that. I also wanted to note that I read the first volume of the manga and not the single chapter releases on Pixiv, the website this manga gets published on, because apparently Iwatobi made a lot of adjustments. I did try and compare and found that they changed quite a lot, or rather than that, they added a lot of pages to make the story a bit more coherent and I guess just flow a bit better. The coloring as well is different because apparently it used to be a bit greener than that it is now. So yeah, this was a great manga, really happy to have read it. I first actually thought that this was a one-shot because the volume didn't state that it was the first in the series, but I found that around the end of September the second volume came out, so I'm really excited to get that one once it's on sale. So a while back in episode 4 I spoke about Fobia, which is this horror anthology manga written by Hara Katsunori and drawn by Goto Yukiko, and it's a manga in which phobias are taken to the extreme. I remember enjoying the first volume, so I decided to keep an eye out on any further developments, and I found out that the second volume came out back in July. The second volume deals with another set of fears. The first chapter was about a girl called Yuno who had a fear of being hated, so she would always let everyone walk all over her. The story is written from the perspective of her only friend. She talks about how Yuno transferred schools when her abusive mother took her own life. We get to see that whenever someone compliments Yuno, she would immediately give the person the thing they complimented her for, like for instance a key holder or a pen. When the narrator tells Yuno that her hair is pretty, she cuts it off the next day to give it to her. So as you can see, it's a very intense fear of being hated. Now, as they grow up and enter high school, Yuno keeps letting people take advantage of her, to the point where she lets her male classmates take advantage of her sexually. And as you can expect, this does not do any miracles for her reputation. Due to the narrator's association with Yuno, she starts to get ostracized as well. Additionally, Yuno is showing extreme obsessive behavior, which leads to the narrator having to break off their friendship, which is absolutely devastating for Yuno. She stops going to school, and then one day when the narrator is walking on the street, people are whispering about her, and at one point some smelly dude comes walking up to her and he asks if he could have a go too. And she of course is naturally confused because she has no idea what's happening. But then she finds Yuno doing sexual favors for people in the park in exchange for money and food. The thing that's really weird about this whole situation is that Yuno doesn't really look like herself anymore. Actually, she looks exactly like the narrator, because as it turns out, she went to get plastic surgery in order to look exactly like her. And this really drives the narrator over the edge, and she tries to strangle Yuno, but instead Yuno manages to strangle her, and so she becomes ready to take over her entire life. So I was not vibing with this material at all. I felt so icky and gross after reading this story, and it made me very uncomfortable, and not in a good way like most horror kind of does to me. I think that it was just the sheer amount of debauchery that really put me off, and it got me to a point where I kind of was like, okay, I've had enough of this series. I don't think I really want to read more of this. And yeah, this story also kind of like made me wonder as to why I really liked the first volume. Moving on, I also recently read Black Paradox because at the time I saw that Viz Media was about to publish the English edition, and you know, it turned out to be one of my favorites of Ito. The manga is one of his long form pieces, and it's about a group of 4 strangers who meet up after having met on this suicide website called Black Paradox, where people can meet in order to take their own lives together. You have Maruso, a nurse who wants to die because of the anxiety she has over the future. Then you have Barachi, and half of her face is covered in this giant birthmark, and she kept losing the desire to live every time she looked at herself in the mirror. Then there are 2 men, Pitan, an engineer who has a robot clone who feels that his clone is better than him. And then finally there's Taburo, who sees his own doppelganger, which he believes means that he will die soon, but he actually wants to die on his own terms. And yes, these are our 4 main characters. They get together in a car and drive to a secluded place in order to die together. And this marks the start of a series of really strange events. Like I said before, this is one of my favorite works of Ito. I like the overall plot and the development of it. The story starts off very insignificant, or maybe a better word is that it starts off very small and then it just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and eventually it just kind of like gets completely out of hand. This was also one of his works where I had this extremely fulfilled feeling after reading it, where I was like, yeah, this is actually a great place to end this story. In any case, about a year ago or so, I bought a ton of shoujo horror manga because I was doing a video about it, and I ended up not using quite a bit of it for that specific video, so I decided to read 2 of them so I could talk about them on the podcast. The first one I read was Roa No Mori, or Forest of Law by Ichiha. This is the second and also last manga that they made since 2008. It seems that they have made a career switch, but are still working in the creative industry. In any case, Roa no Mori is a short story collection consisting of 3 tales that are about 60 pages long, as well as a 5-pager. In the first tale, we get introduced to the premise of these stories. The Forest of Law is a website which contains urban legends. It's a website that is constantly changing its URL, so really the only way that you can access it is if you get sent the link, so if you get invited. Besides this peculiarity, this website also has the capability of kind of cursing you. That is, if you are invited to the Forest of Law and you read these urban legends, your normal life will change due to some type of misfortune. You might go insane, maybe one of your relatives gets killed. In a nutshell, something horrible that is life-changing will happen to you. As for the 3 short stories, each concerns a case in which someone has been invited to this website. I did not like this manga. The art style is very 2000s generic shoujo manga, which I'm not a fan of. Additionally, the stories were just really poorly written. I never felt a moment of suspense, and the stories all felt very rushed and incomplete. I felt myself constantly having to kind of infer what was going on, which in general isn't all that bad. You know, I like figuring things out, but because the stories were so not scary and compelling, it felt more like pain than anything else. So I would not recommend this one. However, I would the second one I read, which is called Furou Kyoudai, or the Furou Siblings. This is a single volume published in 2009 and was created by Shivasu Yuki. It centers around the Furou twins, older sister Kyoko and younger brother Daisuke. Both are spirit mediums, but when they are alone, their powers are so weak that evil spirits are just constantly trying to take their shot and attacking them. However, when they are in close physical contact with each other, they are able to repel spirits with ease, and so as a result, they do everything together. They go to school together, they sleep in the same bed, they take baths together, etc., etc. And thankfully, this is all not in a incesty or romantic way. They are purely staying together for their own safety. However, people around them don't believe that they're mediums and just think that their sibling relationship is just really weird and creepy. Some even think that they're dating, but they always refute that, and it's pretty clear in the manga that that also isn't the case. Anyway, the manga has 5 chapters, which I think you could kind of characterize as supernatural slice of life stories. The first 3 chapters are each single stories. In the first, you get to see basically what happens to Kyoko and Daisuke when they are separated, and I felt that this was a really good and fun introduction to the characters. In the second one, they end up helping a classmate with a spirit that is attached to her, and in the third chapter, Kyoko kind of gets cursed. Then the last 2 chapters make up a longer story in which they also try to help a classmate. I liked all of the stories, the last one in particular, because there's this really cool twist at the end that I appreciated. But yeah, I guess you could characterize this as a horror manga, but it's more so just a comedy supernatural manga than anything like really hardcore scary. As you can see from the cover, the manga kind of has an Addams Family feel to it. Their character designs was definitely one of the things that I liked in particular about this manga. Besides that, the twins are very likable, and despite their sort of subdued personalities, it's fun to see them interact with other characters, like for instance their mom, who is just kind of driven nuts by their behavior. Shivasu definitely has a great sense of plot building as well as comedic timing, which I greatly appreciate. I also wanted to mention that I ended up looking into Shivasu's other work, and I found that she made this one-shot last year called Shinigami GRIMM to FUKOU SHOUNEN, or the Shinigami called GRIMM and the Unfortunate Boy. It's about this kid called Kodama Masuru who seems to have a knack for finding misfortune. In yet another episode in his series of unfortunate events, a Grim Reaper called Grimm tries to take his soul. However, Grimm is super tiny, really weak, and very cute. So Masuro has always kept people far away from him, but now the addition of Grimm to his life has resulted in a ton of unexpected fun. Now, I haven't read this manga yet, but I got it during the last sale on Bookwalker, not sponsored, and I checked through the first couple of pages and it's so fun. Like, I mean, I don't know if it's fun, but it looks really fun and very wholesome. Like, there's this panel of Grimm when she tries to execute Masaru, and she has like the tiniest scythe in her hands and she just screams, "Shina!" Like, nothing happens. Her character design as well is just far too cute. But yeah, seeing how much I enjoyed Furou Kyoudai, I think I'm going to have a good time with this one as well. And of course, as always, I will be sure to discuss this on the podcast once I've read it. So recently I stumbled upon this shoujo magazine called Asuka. It was the 2022 November issue that really caught my eye, so I decided to give them a look to see if I could find any interesting shoujo manga, and I did. I ended up finding two actually. The one that is displayed on the cover is called Sharakuna, KAIKI SHINREI KENMONROKU, which translates to Sharakuna, Mysterious Psychic Memoirs.
Hello, Editing Seiji here again. In hindsight, Paranormal Memoirs is actually a more suitable translation.
This was created by Nagano Akira, and it seems that this is actually their first long-form manga, because I couldn't find much else than a one-shot and two short story collections they were part of. Now, when I found out about this manga, the first volume was about to get released, but yeah, it wasn't out yet. But I found this website called Comic Walker, which happens to be a website of Kadokawa that offers manga chapters for free, and it actually made the first 3 chapters available. So I kind of like scrolled through that one because yeah, the quality on the website is complete ass, so it was really hard for me to read the kanji. So I was like, okay, screw it, I'm just going to look at like the panels and read a tiny bit. But I got the vibe that this was a really good mix of macabre and comedy. So from what I've gathered, it seems that Sharakuna is a supernatural / comedy mystery manga about a young editor at a publishing company called Vato. He ends up getting assigned to a novelist that goes by the name of Sharaku, who is kind of a weird and mysterious guy. Vato, however, really isn't happy about this because ever since he was a kid, he just never liked scary stuff. In any case, the publishing company hasn't heard from Sharaku in over 3 weeks, so Vato is sent to his house to check on him to see what's going on. There, Vato finds him hiding under a bunch of papers. After a short introduction, Sharaku convinces Vato to take him to a dark forest where they find this really, really creepy dude. They have a bit of a chat before they part ways, but Sharaku ends up running after this dude, and when he finally catches up with him, he sees that he's burying a corpse. And at this point, girl, I was sold. I was like, I need to read this manga. So I went straight ahead to pre-order it, and it's since come out. And actually, I'm going to be reading it after I finish recording this podcast. So it suffices to say that I'm really looking forward to this one. The second one I found is called HACHIOUJI Mebutsu Tengu no Koi, and this was created by Nanao Tomo. Its first volume was already out when I discovered it, so I bought it, and so I will leave you for a bit in suspense and we'll try and discuss it the next episode. Finally, I wanted to talk about this manga called DANTOU no ARUKANNJA, so the Archangel of Decapitation. So it's written by Karin Sora and it's drawn by Meiji Mello, and it's set in the 18th century in France during the French Revolution. The main character is a fictionalized version of Louis-Antoine Léon de Saint-Just, also known as the Archangel of Death. So Sanju was a major figurehead during the revolution and was responsible for sending many people to the guillotine. In this manga, he has a younger sister by the name of Marie, who at the start of the story has found someone to spend the rest of her life with, or so she thinks. It turns out that her new husband is actually a con man and has for some time, in exchange for favorable business dealings, been supplying a baron with virgins who the baron then in turn SAs. Marie is tricked and the baron brands her with his family crest in order to mark her as so-called second-hand goods. In order to save herself, Marie manages to flee by jumping out of the window, and in the process of this she gets severely hurt. She gets sent to a hospital where Sanju questions Marie's husband as to what exactly happened, and he flat out tells him, look, so what happened is that your sister is like crazy and I don't want to be with her anymore. Obviously, Sanju doesn't buy this and he finds out what actually happened. In the meantime, Marie has woken up, but she has gone totally mute. Sanju believes that if he takes revenge on her husband and the baron, that she will be able to be happy again. He manages to capture both of the men, killing them in really gruesome ways, but unfortunately this doesn't help change Marie's condition. She still doesn't talk or respond. This leads Sanju to believe that in order for his sister to be happy again, he needs to rid the entire country of evil people, i.e. the aristocrats. He even reckons that that might not even be enough and that he just might have to destroy the entire country. I have to say that the first chapter of this manga really enticed me. The way the first dude gets killed is so incredibly gnarly. But then as the story went on, I found Sanju to be a very bland character. It was giving me the light Yagami skinwalking vibes, and not in a good way. I ended up reading the first volume, which consists of the first 5 chapters, and I found the structure of the manga to be too formulaic for my liking. First, there's a bad guy who Sanju deems to be bad, and so he and his companion kidnap him and torture him in some gruesome type of way until they eventually die. In between these events, there is some plot progression, but so far nothing special enough to get me excited for, the development of the story. The fact as well that at the end of the volume, there was this 30-year-old detective who looked like a child that was giving really strong L vibes, and that just really solidified it for me that I didn't want to continue with this manga. The story just fell really flat, like it had no heart to it, and that's really a shame because the first chapter was really promising to me. And now we have come to the segment that is known as
so the title of this section has changed as well. For now, if you have a question you would like to ask me about anything, you can leave it in the comment section below. If you would like me to give you a tailored recommendation, you can ask that as well. In any case, at the time of recording this podcast episode, I hadn't yet received questions. I did get some during the last podcast episode, so I'll start answering some of those as from next week.
I'm filming these episodes a bit ahead of time so that I have a bit of a buffer. So at the moment, I don't have any questions. So yeah, that's the end of this segment. And yeah, that's everything that I had to say for this podcast episode. As always, thank you so much for watching and or listening, and I hope to see you in another episode soon. Cheers!